You do.
Well, good morning, everybody. And noting that we do have 5 members of the committee in attendance, I'd like to welcome you to the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting of February 8th, 2022. And I'd like to call the members to order. This meeting is being held remotely through Zoom and is being held on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, the original custodians of the unceded land in which the city of Ottawa is located. Those who do not need to participate in the meeting can also watch it live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel. A reminder to participants to please keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. I will provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand in Zoom. For panelists, the raised hand option is found at the bottom of the participants list. For those calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declaration of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadlines have passed for residents to register to speak and to provide written submissions to the subcommittee, residents may still make written submissions to Planning Committee and Council. If you have technical difficulties signing into the meeting, you can contact the committee coordinator by calling 613-580-2424, extension 22953. A reminder that if participants are having technical issues with their Zoom connection, they may call in using the backup telephone number provided by the coordinator. I've received no regrets. Could the committee coordinator please call the roll? A reminder to members to unmute themselves when they're called.
Member Halsell. Member Podolsky.
Here.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Here.
Member Conforti.
Here.
Councillor Brackington.
Here.
Councillor Moffat. Vice Chair Quinn.
Here.
Chair King.
Here.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, are the minutes of Tuesday, November 30th, 2021 confirmed?
Carried.
Confirmed. Given the current state of emergency, I'd suggest to the subcommittee that we make expedient use of meeting time. Given the number of items, we will proceed with a consent agenda, and I will ask for a motion to defer the Heritage Watch List Committee. So let's go through the consent agenda. The first item is application for new construction at 480 Cloverdale Road, and this item will be held as we have a number of speakers registered. Item number 2, Heritage Watch List update. And I'll ask the vice chair to introduce the motion to defer that item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion reads, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee defer the report ACS 2022 PIE RHU 003 relating to the Heritage Watch List update to its meeting of March 8th, 2022.
Thank you. Is the deferral carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Item number 3, designation of the Dr. Robert Law House at 190 Laurier Avenue East. Is the report carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried. Item 4, application to alter 283 Elgin Street. There are applicants who are in attendance for this item, but is there a need for the applicants to speak if the items are carried? So I'll ask that question to both Q9 Planning and Design and also Peter McCallum from the Whalesbone on whether they need to comment on this if the item will just simply carry.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I do not need to speak if the committee is prepared to carry the item.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So is this report carried?
Carried. Carried.
Carried.
Carried. Item number 5, application to alter 619 Manor Avenue. This item will be held as we have speakers registered. And Item 6, status update, Built Heritage Subcommittee inquiries and motions. Is this report received?
Yes, received.
Received. Item 7, application to demolish 323 Daily Avenue. And I'll ask the Vice Chair to introduce a motion to formally add this item to the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion reads, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee approve the addition of this report for consideration by the committee at today's meeting pursuant to Section 89(3) of the Procedure Bylaw, being bylaw number 2021-24, as it is a time-sensitive safety matter.
Is that motion carried?
Carried.
Carried. Now, we do have the applicants also for this item in attendance. Is there a need to speak if this item carries? And I do know that Michael Paulowan, Jordan Ferrero, and Carolina Campos have been registered. So is there any need for a statement or any comment? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, there is not. And if I can just take this moment to wish the members of council well in dealing with the things that they have had to deal with over the last 11 days.
I appreciate that, Mr. Paulowan. It has been very tough, especially for two of our colleagues around the table, Councillor McKinney and Councillor Fleury. Councillor Fleury has raised his hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions to staff for the record, more so. I just want to...
Are they quick questions? Can we just proceed with those right now, or will it require us to hold?
I'm in your hands, Mr. Chair.
You know what? In the interest of expediency, I'm willing for you to quickly ask those questions, and if we can dispense with this report relatively quickly, I know it will be to your benefit. So please go ahead and ask some questions to staff.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank Jordan. I want to thank Michael. I want to thank city staff. I know there's been ongoing discussions and reviews and studies, and I know a lot of this was being done at the staff level. So I think it is important for committee and for the public to capture all the work and the considerations here and understand how or if this sets a precedent going forward. So those are the discussion areas that I'll be asking here for Anne and team. So Anne, we had met last week now, the time flies, but just to understand that there was a report to come forward. At that point, you didn't know what your staff recommendation were going to be. Could you maybe walk committees and the community through the work that led to the report today?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Fleury. We have had on this file several engineering reports and studies, assessments that have been submitted. We've worked with our colleagues in Building Code Services to understand the condition of the building, as well as the practicality associated with possible future restoration, and some of the items that complicate that in terms of safety of the building, the extent of the damage, practicality in terms of timing that it's winter, and all the while addressing concerns with public safety. So we certainly analyzed the building. I think at this point there's between 3 and 5 different engineering reports that have been submitted. So we've been working very carefully, and some of the analysis is current condition and future possibility for stabilization and restoration, in addition to the condition of the building.
Thank you for that. And ultimately, can you clarify how you've landed on the direction in front of us?
Yeah, so basically what it came down to was we assessed our first thing was to look at the engineering assessments that we received, which was basically an assessment that said the building should be immediately demolished. We had that peer reviewed by John Cook and Associates, which indicated that there was a stabilization measure available to us. So we examined the practicality of undertaking that stabilization measures and practicality, including cost, timeline, feasibility. Once we had an understanding of the stabilization measure, we looked at the possibility of restoration. So if the building could be stabilized, how would we go about restoring it? What was left of the building? So you can see in the report, some of the masonry is in good condition, although that's disputed back and forth in the reports, but the damage is extensive. All of the structure of the building from this, at least the second floor up and maybe the first floor, including the floorboards, load-bearing walls, floors have been damaged. The roof is completely damaged. The porch has localized damage. Barge porch has been destroyed. Bay window damaged. All the windows are damaged, removed. So the damage here is really extensive. So we looked at those two, like those were sort of the stabilization assessment, and then possibility of restoration were two really big factors in our assessment.
Okay, and then sorry, Mr. Chair, but one more question, and then I should cover the elements for record here. So, and I don't know if it's you or if Leslie or if someone else is on, but feel free to answer if it's appropriate. So the decisions that you're bringing in front of us, how does it not set a precedent? Because I think committee and council and even residents want to make sure that properties that are heritage are protected. And I think the spirit of that is important. So I want to make sure that, can you maybe for the record clarify how this does set a precedent or how it does not set a precedent going forward?
Sure, Councillor Fleury. So in terms of what we did here was our colleagues in Building Code Services worked with us to have that peer review of the first engineering report that indicated that the building should be demolished. We did that because of the building's heritage status, and that let us undertake our assessment. So that was sort of an additional step that took place because it was a heritage building. That gave it the chance to not be immediately demolished and go through this assessment, which has been very comprehensive as to whether it should be demolished or should it be restored. And that's the report that's in front of the committee today. In terms of it setting a precedent, myself and Leslie Collins, we looked back on other fires that have happened to heritage buildings. And I can tell you that there's no two that are like, there's never going to be another situation like this, because we look at the extent of the damage. We look at the site, some of the challenges to the site in terms of restoration or even stabilization here have to do with winter, its proximity to the neighbor to the east, how much of the building has been damaged, what type of designation it is. In this case, it's a Part 5 building. It's in a district. Some of our other buildings could be a Part 4 building. They're sort of one of a kind. There's so many factors that go into our analysis. And then, of course, working with our colleagues in Building Code Services to assess the safety and the condition of the building. So it's not precedent setting in that there's no situations when it comes to buildings that will be the same. So they all go under analysis in terms of retention of cultural heritage value, and then safety with our colleagues in Building Code Services. So we have no concern about it being precedent setting.
And I'm sorry, Chair, my team reminded me of a one question in terms of retention. So there is components of the building that you're saying are salvageable. Like, how do you see the report's not necessarily detailed on that, and I'm sure that will be in a work in progress, but how do you see the next steps for that part of the discussions?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fleury. So the report doesn't go into the restoration of the building because we don't have any information on that. We have information on a stabilization approach, and we have information on the condition of the building. So the condition of the building is such that, that some of the masonry could be in good repair, but there's engineering reports that differ on that opinion. Something the extent is more serious or more severe than others. So what we've done is propose as part of the condition of approval, a salvage plan to retain historic material where possible. And there's two components that will be associated with that. A, what can be safely salvaged, like how can it be accessed and safely removed? Is any sort of sensitive demolition possible given the current condition of the building? And two, based on the extensive damage of the fire, what material can be reused or has it been too severely damaged? So we have that as a condition of our approval, that the applicant submit a plan to us to sort of assess that, the opportunity for salvaging.
Thank you, Councillor, and I appreciate everybody's patience as well. The intent was for this to be quick, but I appreciate the question from the ward councillor. So we'll just continue on here. I see that member Podolsky has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you. Of course, fire like this is tragic, and the building contributes to the Heritage Conservation District, and Councillor Fleury's questions, I think, are very appropriate. I would just add one more question to staff, and that is that the last report, the engineering report, suggested that the staff had adopted recommendation of the Cook report to embark on a stabilization process. And could you explain why you reversed on that, if that is true? And I can understand it, having had quite a bit of experience in restoring burnt buildings. But the last thing that I would recommend in your report is that should it be demolished as recommended, that the photographic and survey record of the building be enacted before the demolition, so that there is a record for the archive as to what was there.
Thank you, Member Podolsky. I'm not sure I can specifically answer the comment about that staff have adopted the approach in the John Cook report because we haven't. Certainly, when the John Cook report was a peer review of that first engineering report that was submitted that indicated the building had to be be demolished immediately, the John Cook report provided an assessment of that report and an opinion that there was a stabilization option available to us, and staff assessed that option that was presented. So we haven't adopted it. We're not recommending that be undertaken, but I think it was just it was considered in our assessment. That was what we sort of used to undertake our analysis of future options. And in terms of documentation, I just noted in my report that the engineering reports, as well as the photos that we have of the building to this point, with our colleague, we have quite a lot of photos that have been taken of the building from our colleagues in Building Code Services, that those would be shared with the City of Ottawa archives.
Thank you. I'm going to support the motion, but I would also recommend that the reports that were referred to, such as the Cook report and any other ones, be shared with the Built Heritage Subcommittee for the record, so that we are able to study and see the staff decisions, so that we will know for future purposes how the recommendation was arrived at. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Podolsky, and I suppose we can consider that as a direction to staff. Member Hassel.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick questions for city staff, particularly involving the salvage initiative. This has been brought up in a couple of city files to date. And I was just wondering, when we're looking at a demolition like this, where there are supposedly intact heritage elements, as well as those that have been destroyed, what is the spirit behind this salvage? What is the city hoping to see?
Thank you, Member Hassel. In this case, I think the general answer would be that the city aims to salvage as much historic material as possible. And I'll just use that term generally in terms of, important heritage material that can reasonably be reused. That concept is somewhat complicated here because of the condition of the building and the ability to enter and remove material safely and the condition of any of that material. But in general, that I would say that's our overarching goal. And here, because the properties in the Daily Avenue HCD, the plan actually speaks to exploring options for salvaging historic material wherever possible. So we also undertook that to meet the intent of the Daily Avenue HCD plan.
Okay, thank you. I guess where I'm going with this is, after they've salvaged these materials, they've taken the stained glass windows that remain intact. They've taken, whatever elements are deemed salvageable. Are those then the proponent of the owner to just hang on to definitely? Does the city collect them? Is there a plan for, once these materials have been removed from site, that they are in some way going to be repurposed, or are they just diverted from landfill?
Thank you, Member Halsell. The answer is it depends. And that's why we're asking for a plan in this case, because if it sort of depends what the future of the property holds. If it's a situation where it's going to be the same owner continuing with the property and looking to do a restoration project, maybe there's an opportunity for reuse of material on site. In this case, the owner's plan is, as I understand it, is to sell the property. So what we would need to do in this plan, the salvage plan, is identify exactly what you said. What happens to any of the historic materials that we identify as being possible to reuse. So that will be part of what we need to consider on this site. But we wouldn't be requiring any future owner to necessarily use this material just because we aren't able to do that. But so it's sort of, that's part of what we will be looking for in the contents of the salvage plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand again.
Sorry, I attempted to lower my hand in interest of efficiency.
Okay. On this item, I know that this is unorthodox, but obviously we have just brought this as a measure, and it was not on the agenda. And we do have David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa who wanted to provide some comment. So I will ask the committee coordinator to bring him in for comment.
Coming online now, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did not see this report. It was, I looked on the agenda until last night and it hadn't been posted there. I just have a question. What are the interim plans for the property once the house is demolished? Are they going to turn it into a parking lot or parkette, or will it just be fenced off? Thank you.
And through me, I'll allow that question. So I'll relay that question to staff for response.
Thank you, Chair. So staff have included a condition in this report, just that the site be maintained in good condition to the satisfaction of the GM of Planning, Real Estate and Economic Development. The condition states the owner shall prohibit the use of the property for any other interim uses and maintain the property in accordance with the property standards bylaw. So that's where we have a condition to sort of address that. So in the interim, the site will be maintained in good condition, and then any future development on this site will be subject to an application under the Ontario Heritage Act and will be in front of this committee for consideration.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for staff for answering those questions in detail. Is this report carried?
Carried.
Carried. With thanks to the committee, we'll now proceed to the held items. So that felt like it was held, but obviously for the interest of the time, we want to move forward. So the next area on our agenda is postponements and deferrals, an application for new construction at 480 Cloverdale Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. This is our first item. This item was originally considered, as we know, at the November 30th, 2021 Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting. It was deferred, and the committee is now considering it again. Heritage staff received the revised application on January 31st, and a replacement report was distributed to committee and posted to ottawa.ca yesterday, February 7th. Following staff's review of the recent application and after careful analysis, staff have prepared a new report recommending refusal of the revised application. This new report provides the context and history on this matter and on how staff's and also on staff's new recommendation. The revised report also includes the most recent plans, which were confirmed by the applicant as being their final proposed design. Before considering this item, I would like to ask the Vice Chair to move a motion to replace the deferred report with the new report put forward by staff so it can formally be before this committee.
Thank you, Chair. The motion reads as follows. Whereas report ACS 2021 PIE RHU-0029 in relation to is that the correct? Is this pertaining to Cloverdale or Manor? Sorry, is this
It looks
pertaining
like
to
it is the
Cloverdale?
replacement report.
This is the correct report, if I
This is
may,
the-
Mr. Chair.
Okay, my apologies. I'll carry on without repeating the report number. Whereas report as numbered in relation to 480 Cloverdale Road was originally considered at the November 30th, 2021 Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting, was deferred and included on the agenda for the February 8th, 2022 Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting, published on January 28th, 2022. Whereas Heritage staff received the revised application on January 31st, and a replacement report on the revised application was distributed to committee and posted to ottawa.ca on February 7th, 2022. Therefore, be it resolved that the revised report in relation to 480 Cloverdale Road replace the original report submitted to the Built Heritage Subcommittee so that committee may consider the revised report at its meeting of February 8th, 2022. And the revised report number is ACS 2022 PIE RHU 0007.
Thank you, Vice Chair Quinn. I see that Member Brockington has raised his hand to speak on this motion.
Chair, thank you. I'm just a procedural question. Are these minor revisions that have been made, or am I getting this property and application mixed up with another one where you had referenced staff's changing their recommendation to this committee? And I ask that because if the changes are substantial and it was only publicly posted yesterday, how we could be discussing this matter now and not give the public sort of sufficient notice to absorb whatever documents were posted just yesterday. So if they're minor in nature, then perhaps we can proceed today, but if they're more substantial, then perhaps this should be deferred a month.
Well, this has been a process. We know that this came before us at our previous meeting of subcommittee, and staff had been working in conjunction with the applicant to have changes. So the idea, of course, seeking a better application before us, and staff has made some recommendations, and I actually will ask Leslie to discuss the changes that did come in from staff. But this was expected, as we know, that there would be some level of dialogue with the potential for the report to change based on what was incoming.
Can I just ask then, maybe I'm getting this mixed up with another property that you had referenced staff have now changed their recommendation, or is this the same one?
No, staff has changed its recommendation on the 480 Cloverdale property, and we held that consideration of that application so that there could be back and forth between the applicant. So that's the rationale here.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So based on that clarification, is the motion carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Good morning. This item concerns the application for new construction at 480 Cloverdale Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. The subcommittee will remember this item from its meeting on November 30th, 2021. The item was deferred to allow staff and the applicant the opportunity to work together on revising the proposal. Next slide, please. Just a refresher, The property at 480 Cloverdale Road is located on the east side of Cloverdale Road between Hillsdale and Lakehurst Roads. It is bounded to the north by 484 Cloverdale Road, a grade 1 Cape Cod style home, and the rear of 560 Hillsdale Road, just to the right of that, which can be seen on this slide. It is a double lot consisting of 2 parcels. And to the south of that is a vacant double lot at 454 Cloverdale Road, which also consists of 2 parcels. To the immediate east is the Rockcliffe Park tennis courts. Next slide, please. So a number of revisions have been made since this application was last before the subcommittee. The floating volume or skybox to the rear of the building has been deleted and incorporated as a floating dining room volume in the middle of the home. The footprint of the building has been decreased, but its gross floor area has increased in size. The driveway at the front of the building is also increased in size. With respect to setbacks, the rear yard has been increased by 7 meters, but the front yard setback has decreased by 1 meter, and several further changes are noted on this slide, as well as in the new staff report. Next slide, please. On this slide is the revised site plan showing the floating volume moved to the middle of the building in light gray, and the increased driveway surface at the front. The north wing of the building is also no longer angled away from the north lot line. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides show elevations of the proposed building. On the left is the front elevation, and on the right is the rear. The subcommittee will notice that some changes have been proposed with respect to materiality. Next slide, please. This slide shows the north and south elevations of the building. The north elevation on the top of this slide abuts the adjacent grade 1 home. Next slide, please. On this slide is the revised landscape plan, which notably shows additional tree planting along the north and south lot boundaries. Next slide, please. 4 renderings of the building are shown on this slide with trees omitted. As can be seen, the building has less variation in materials and articulation than before, as well as fewer windows. Next slide, please. Heritage staff have evaluated the proposed revisions against the guidelines in the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan. The subcommittee will remember that in November last year, staff expressed concern about the length and mass of the proposed building, especially along its north elevation. While the length of the building has been reduced by approximately 6 meters, Heritage staff consider this to be only a minor reduction in length, and our concerns remain. In addition, further changes to the proposal have brought it further out of conformity with the HCD plan, especially as it relates to front yards, height, mass, landscaping, and the overall objectives of the plan. In staff's opinion, the cumulative effects of these changes, together with staff's original concerns, merit the conclusion that the proposal does not conform with the HCD plan. Next slide, please. Staff have also reevaluated the proposal against the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. Again, because of the changes made to the proposal, staff are of the opinion that it does not conform with standards 1 and 11. Next slide, please. Following the decision of the subcommittee to defer the application, Heritage staff was invited to a meeting with the applicant, neighbours, and Councillor King to discuss our collective concerns and the applicant's proposed revisions. The revised submission package was also recirculated after staff received a complete application. Next slide, please. Heritage staff are recommending that the application be refused as it does not conform with the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan or the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. Next slide, please. And that concludes this presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that detailed report. We did receive correspondence from numerous residents from the Heritage Park Heritage Committee, as well as Heritage Ottawa. And correspondence was also submitted on behalf of the applicant. We have a number of registered speakers on this item, and the first registered speaker is Michael Killen of the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association. And I think you're muted, Michael.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm on the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Committee and have been working with the applicant and other members of our committee to assess this application for a heritage permit. And following the November 30th meeting, it was agreed that this matter would be adjourned so that the applicant could make revisions to the plans to conform with our concerns under the heritage plan. And we did receive these revisions. And I'm sorry to say that while they have reduced the size a little bit, the building is still mammoth. Under the heritage plan, the new construction has to be of the same mass, height, length as other historic houses on the streetscape. In this case, it's still massive. In fact, when you compare the plan to the neighboring grade 1 house at 484 Cloverdale, the new proposed house is at least 4 times the mass. But what really strikes me, and I've had this confirmed by the city heritage staff, this house is 138 feet long, this proposed house. Well, the standard building lot in Rockcliffe is 100 by 100. So that this house is actually longer than the ordinary length of a standard building lot. It's actually 138 feet, which means it's 38% bigger than a standard lot. And of course, on a standard lot, the house would have to fit with all the setbacks, so it wouldn't be 100 feet. So this house is way too long, and it's way too massive, and it's still not respecting the requirements for the height. So I'm afraid the architect or the applicant has prepared the plans for this house in complete disregard or respect for what is provided for in the heritage plan. And of course, the heritage plan was enacted by the City of Ottawa in 2016 and has the force of a bylaw. It was enacted under the Ontario Heritage Act, so it has the force of law, and it has to be respected. So for these reasons, the house remains too massive, way too long, too tall, and is nothing that respects the heritage plan. And we're very pleased to find last night that the heritage staff, which originally approved the application for a heritage permit, have now replaced that report and have recommended that the Built Heritage Subcommittee not approve this application for a heritage plan, a heritage permit. So I think that covers everything that I wanted to say, and these are contained in written submissions which were filed by myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Seeing none from the committee.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Vice Chair Quinn.
Sorry, my screen slipped and I couldn't get to my raise hand feature. Yes, I do have a question. I'm sorry. And I just want to go back to the reference to the size of the design in terms of it being larger than a traditional Rockcliffe Park lot. And my question is just pertains to the fact that this lot is not an average sized Rockcliffe Park lot. It is maybe double the size of an average Rockcliffe Park lot. So I'm wondering if when considering that factor, do those same restrictions apply as it would in a traditional the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association's interpretation of the plan? Should those same standards be imposed here when clearly we're talking about quite a different lot size?
Well, thank you. That's a very good question. In the Cloverdale area, which I will call, this house is on Cloverdale, and the Cloverdale area is bounded by another street called Hillsdale to the north, and then Lansdowne North to the east, and then Lakehurst to the south. That block, which is about 20 acres, all the lots are the same size. They're all this lot is 220 feet long. And one of the main objectives of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Plan, and it's written right at the beginning of the plan under objectives, is to maintain the greenscape and the park-like qualities of Rockcliffe Park. And in the Cloverdale area, all of the houses, even though they're on the same size lots, are all built along the street, and they leave behind a big green space, a big park-like quality. And so all of these houses enjoy that attribute, which is one of the attributes that the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Plan is designed and specifies preserving. What this house is going to do, it's going to build right into that park-like quality in the back. And as I said, it'll be 138 feet. And it's going to take away that greenscape, that green space, that greenscape, that park-like quality, which is contrary to the objectives. And as I said in our submission, if this house was double the length of the neighboring Grade 1 Heritage House, that is understandable because it has such a big lot. But in this case, it's 4 times or more. And it basically obliterates the green space so that all the neighbors in the Cloverdale area and all those 4 streets I listed will no longer be enjoying a greenscape. They'll be looking into this house. Now, the Rockcliffe Heritage Plan does not regulate design. In this proposed house, as you've probably seen on the plans, looks like a concrete bunker. And there's nothing wrong with that. A person can build whatever taste they have, but it has to be in accordance with the mass and the scale, the length and the height that are required under the Heritage Plan. And this large concrete bunker is going to be spoiling the greenscape and the park-like qualities, which are now on that lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other additional questions from members. Thank you so much for your deputation. The next registered speaker is Andrew Reeves from Linebox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, especially today with some wacky times for everybody. So I appreciate your time. I'll have to get a presentation up if I may. I think everyone's pretty well aware of this application, and in 5 minutes, I'll do my best to maybe focus more on what has been done since the last submission. Yeah, and maybe I'll just cue on slides so we can go next slide, and I'll speak to them as we go, and we'll see how coordinated we can get between these things. So we can go to the next one, which is more the first slide, which is the site plan. Obviously, one of the major elements that has been done, this site plan shows the previous application with the skybox I do want to explain further about the skybox. It's not just a deletion of the one form. The original application had a screened-in porch, and as everyone knows, the site slopes down quite dramatically. So the skybox was fully exposed, as in what you see. So it was a 3-story structure outside the ground with a rooftop bump up and a rooftop terrace. All of that has been deleted, not moved. The dining room that we speak of, it found its way inside the home to be inside where no one can see to help reduce the massing. Next slide, please. I think some of the presentations were great. I want to thank at this moment to Tony and Mr. Wilson for allowing an additional informal meeting after the last application before this one to further have discussions, as well as city staff has been very helpful, and obviously it has their very strong opinions, and so do we. So I think it's proving to some good moves. I do want to speak to the backyard. The backyard is in fact 92 feet long, so it is at the length of majority of properties, including longer than adjacent total property length. So we do almost have 100 feet of backyard. We were proposing, the site itself has 54 existing trees. We are only removing 8 of these trees. A lot of the architectural moves are directly respond to that, and proposing 39 new trees. The 39 new trees are shown in green. While we're speaking more of landscape, one other change that we made to multiple changes to this design is deleting all windows to the basements. And in doing so, that means we can delete all the required light wells. And in doing so allows us to keep the grade 100% as it is and reinstate the grade to be 100% as it is. The goal of this project is to be a forest and a forest. The goal of this project is to be fully contained by forest and by nature. That's a major driving factor of our design. Next slide, please. I would skip through the floor plans. I think they're not as relevant as some of the 3D work that I'd like to speak to. I guess if you keep going until they have the side-by-side images, what we did here is we're starting to show images of the existing building with the trees. These trees aren't artistic interpretations. The trees are in the accurate locations of where they are. So you want to be very clear. I know it's mandated. They need to submit drawings that show elevations that you'll never see in real life. So we want to really recreate what is there physically. So we spent a lot of time making sure that we respected the existing slope, existing trees, and then showing what are more colorful like trees as are proposed to help further screen. Next slide, please. This is more coming into the area. Obviously, we have our front, our front porch and our child condition. It isn't concrete. This is stone, natural cedar, natural copper are the 3 materials that are scattered through the entire building. No stucco, no fake, none of those kind of things. We feel that this is an appropriate material for this neighborhood. We picked up on windows and window sizes and proportions that you can see that have changed from the previous application. We picked up some of those proportions from the neighboring houses in the neighborhood. This one shows our little rooftop terrace over the garage, which is exactly identical to the neighboring Heritage One house that has a rooftop patio on top of their garage. So we're trying to pick on certain little elements, major and small. Next slide, please. If you can keep going down to the side-by-side images, might help explain the before and afters. So these slides explain our previous application versus what we're submitting today, left and right. So left is always the previous, right is where we are now. As you can see on the left-hand side, we have played with a material palette to be more in keeping with the, I would call more monochromatic nature of neighboring homes. We deleted the overhang on top of the garage, as you can see, to help reduce the massing. This height is within, this building is in with height. We're not asking for 1 inch of additional height. I do want to make that clear on record that there's not an increase of height required, there's not an increase of setback required, there's not an increase of lot coverage required. Zoning wise, outside heritage concerns, there is no minor variance or request. Next slide, please. Again, we're trying to see how we can subtly pick up windows and textures. You can see on the left how it was versus the right. The windows on our building are the same size and proportion as the heritage home. We're adding some more gridding and grid work to the windows to help break it up, including the different material palettes. Next slide, please. The side elevations, you can see the before and afters. And in fact, I seriously debate that we've deleted a lot of windows. We've broken up the massing as best as we could, knowing that we have privacy issues between both neighbors, even what will be a future home next to us, which also will go through its own design iterations. So we try to make sure that we located windows that one, break up the massing, allow light and sun into our space, but also don't create awkward views to each other. Next slide, please. And this is the rear, which shows you what I consider a very major change on massing, height, massing, length. It's not just a reduction of a skybox. You can see the rooftop terrace that was there, the rooftop access that was there, the massing itself that was there, and then intrusion to the backyard. We're also now showing the landscape as it is 100%. We're not altering the contours one bit. The trees above show you what you actually see from Tony's and other lots to be surprised. Next slide, and I'll be done, and I know I'm ran out of time. So this one shows what happens when we delete the skybox. Again, showing artistic renderings with no trees, which is a bit unfair, but we're sticking with how we need to present these things. This is how you never see this building in real life. It'll be fully treed, and you're still physically on our property. But I do want to show this is how the massing has been affected, both the massing, the height, and the length. And I think I'm right out of time. I don't want to take up any more time with yourselves, maybe some questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Just asking the members if there are any questions. And I don't see hands raised, so thank you for your presentation. The next registered speaker is John Stewart from Commonwealth Historic Resource Management.
Morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm with Commonwealth, and Commonwealth, we prepared the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. The design for 480 Cloverdale has gone through at least 5 formal iterations in response to recommendations to the design for the building, its placement, massing, materiality, and landscape. The plan submitted has been reviewed and has been guided by the guidelines within the Rockcliffe Park District Plan, as well as Parks Canada's standards and guidelines. I realize these are in contradiction to the staff comments that they do not follow the guidelines, but in my estimation, there's a valid analysis and rationale for them to meet the standards and guidelines. A series of consultation meetings with the Heritage Planning Section and the Rockcliffe Park Community Association were held. At each of these sessions, alternatives and suggestions include the replacement of the board fence with a live hedge, introducing larger windows along the north and south facades, introducing smaller windows along the north and south facade, the use of a lighter colored limestone as an exterior cladding, a system of green roofs and permeable pavers, reduction of the building's height and length on the northern elevation, and a careful interpretation of the city's definition of basement. These valid alternatives mitigating impact have been incorporated into the plans for this residence. Throughout the design process, concerns were raised with regard to the very long footprint, particularly along the north elevation. Heritage staff recommended that as a condition of the approval, the length and mass of the building at its north elevation be reconfigured. In response, the length and height of the building have been significantly reduced and the featured skybox eliminated, along with the rooftop terrace. One of the features of the site has been the vegetation, the plant material, and an attempt by the architect to incorporate a design which is not a traditional estate type of architecture in the area, but a design that conforms with the landscape and allows for the preservation of as many trees as possible. As a landscape architect, I found this an intriguing approach where landscape became the priority and the building took on a secondary role. It is the author's opinion that the plan for 480 is in keeping with the character defining attributes of the district by maintaining the estate qualities and park setting envisioned by Kiefer. It acknowledges and respects the grade 1 building next door with the generosity of space around the proposed house and the flow of the space from one property to the next by continuous planting, picturesque views both into and out of the property. So new construction follows the management guidelines for the district in that its siting, form, materials, and detailing are sympathetic to the surrounding natural and cultural environment. The proposed development retains the existing lot size and density. The existing grades are maintained. The siting of the build form is strategically organized to retain existing trees. This strategic approach to the massing also addresses the relationship to the side-by-side, to the side and backyard exceeding zoning bylaw requirements. The comment regarding the lack of green space at the rear is based on the drawings and the details, is in fact the park-like quality of this property. It has been maintained. The height and the mass of the new building have been adjusted and broken up to be more consistent with the grade 1 building next door. And the siting and materials of new buildings, the new building are compatible with grade 1 buildings in the associated streetscape. As recommended in the district study, the design of the new house is of its own time, but harmonizes with its setting and use of limestone, copper, and wood. The design is compatible with the existing streetscape in its height, dimensions, and functions as a private family residence. This is an unusually large lot. It's over twice the size of the...
John, just wanted to apprise you that your time has expired. So if you can conclude, it would be great.
I'll close up, yes. The height is much lower than neighboring buildings and is consistent with the grade 1 property next door. The building has been sited such that the volume at the front does not overwhelm the neighboring grade 1 building, and most of the building's mass is organized in the middle of the lot and screened by mature mixed deciduous and coniferous trees. The concept of link pods that has evolved capitalizes on the attempts to prioritize the site's unique characteristics: a bucolic setting, mature wooded lot, significant grade changes, all of which are attributes of Rockcliffe Park ethos. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any questions? And I don't see any questions from committee, so thank you. Our next registered speaker is Tony Brunst.
Good morning to all at City Hall and to the applicant and the development team. My wife and I have read the submission by Soloway Wright regarding the comments by Mrs. Ratushny at 484 Cloverdale, and just wish to say that we had no prior knowledge of that comment before it was made, and that we believe it is, of course, inappropriate and unfortunate. Having said that, I wanted to get down to business to say that we appreciate the efforts that Andrew Reeves and his team have made, and there has been some dialogue. Yes, they've moved the skybox, and yes, as Adrian Van Wyck pointed out, they also moved that north side of the building, which affects us at 560 Hillsdale, closer to the property line. And so the other thing, the backyard has been increased a little bit. I don't know where Andrew Reeves got the idea that it was 92 feet long. Perhaps it's from the south side of their property, but certainly not from what I can tell on the north side. So the comments we have would like to bring to your attention is our entire backyard lot line borders on the north side of this 480 Cloverdale. The proposed north side of the 480 Cloverdale building will exceed considerably more than half of our backyard lot line. Now, the problem is that the proposed building will be at a height I don't know, it looks to me that it's even more than 33 feet. At Cloverdale, the height of the building is very modest. At the level that we are at, 560 Hilldale, and we have a flat lot, it looks like it's more than 33 feet. And it's definitely 3 very large stories, and it looks like from some of the pictures there's been some mounding around it as well. And so the next thing is, it appears then from our lot, will appear as a very long, solid, very high wall with few windows, which is not very attractive. If you would give us the opportunity, perhaps Adrian or Andrew could find picture number 12, which shows the image on the north side facing our property. It's unfortunately very dark, and it's got a lot of snow on it. It's this picture here. I mean, our land is completely level. It's actually lower than what's shown here, and it's not very attractive. If we go to the next picture, which is this one here, this is the height looking from the tennis court side of the building. Now we're going to be facing for half of our backyard, something this high with sort of kind of no windows on. I mean, this would be fine if it was downtown Ottawa, you know, or even a sidewall. But in fact, for us, it's our backyard. So I know in some areas there are rules that if you're going on facing with your side yard a backyard, you actually have to give more space on the side yard. I guess the last thing I'd like to say is that, of course, this is going to certainly reduce our enjoyment of our property. And at the same time, it's going to significantly reduce the real estate value, which should concern City Hall a little bit because, in fact, you collect property taxes from us. And if the value goes down, you'll get less property taxes. The other thing is that this I acknowledge is obviously the dream home of the applicant, and there's many very, very nice aspects of it. That, I mean, aside from the comments that have been made about the length and the massing. Having said that, I'd ask the applicant to consider if they've thought about, in a way, ruining the dream home that we have now with this massing. And so I'll leave that thought with you and the applicant. Thank you very much for your time and for all the organization work you've done.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any questions? And I see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Muntz, for your presentation. I just have a quick question because this is a complicated enclave in terms of the various properties and property sizes of lots. And I just want to be clear, your property is on Hillsdale. Your backyard aligns with your neighbors. And then there is an additional lot behind you that is technically behind 484 Cloverdale. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. I believe on our right, we have Bill Malhotra. On our left, we have the Cogans rather. And yes, their property lines sort of come more or less halfway from our first lot. And then the second lot begins more or less at that property line, is all the back of the Ratushny home at 484 Cloverdale, and also then the home that is next to the side of the Rockcliffe Tennis Club.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I see no more questions, so thank you for your deputation. And our next registered speaker is Kent Manderville.
Thank you, Councillor King. I would like Kim Ratushny to speak first, please.
Okay, I'll permit that since you're both together. So we can start the time.
Good morning. My name is Kim Ratushny. I am a lawyer in the Ottawa area, and I am here with my husband, Kent Manderville. We are the registered owners of and reside at 484 Cloverdale Road. Thank you for recognizing my standing as the Grade 1 homeowner directly adjacent to the proposed construction. Our property, 484 Cloverdale Road, is immediately adjacent to the applicant's property, 480 Cloverdale. Our house is the Grade 1 property in the streetscape pursuant to the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan. Our property and the applicant's property are subject to the legal restrictions imposed by the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan as approved by bylaw number 2016-89 and the Ontario Heritage Act. This bylaw and the Ontario Heritage Act prevent this committee from granting the permit sought by the applicant. Bylaw 2016-89 incorporates the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan as a bylaw in the City of Ottawa. The bylaw states, and I quote, "A bylaw of the City of Ottawa to adopt the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan enacted by City Council at the meeting of March 23rd, 2016. This plan, enacted by bylaw 2016-89, directly limits this committee's jurisdiction to grant a heritage permit to this application in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Specifically, section 7.4.2 sub 3 at page 29 of this plan enacted by bylaw 2016-89 states that, and I quote, "Construction of new buildings will only be permitted when the new building does not detract from the historic landscape characteristics of the associated streetscape. The height and mass of the new buildings are consistent with the Grade 1 buildings in the associated streetscape, and the siding and materials of the new building are compatible with the Grade 1 building in the associated streetscape." In adopting bylaw number 2016-89, the City of Ottawa sought to expressly limit this committee's jurisdiction to grant heritage permits when these requirements are not met. This committee therefore does not have the jurisdiction to issue heritage permits when these requirements are not met. Our house at 44 Cloverdale Road is a Grade 1 building. It is the Grade 1 building against which the subject proposed construction is to be compared, as we are a Grade 1 building in the streetscape and directly adjacent to the proposed construction. Respectfully, this honorable committee does not have the jurisdiction pursuant to bylaw 2016-89 to permit this permit sought because the proposed construction does not accord with the historic landscape of the associated streetscape. The proposed building height and mass are not consistent with our Grade 1 building in the streetscape and directly adjacent to the proposed construction, and the siding and materials of the proposed building are not compatible with our Grade 1 building in the streetscape and directly adjacent to the proposed construction. Specifically, the siding of the proposed building is not compatible with the pattern of established heritage setbacks. The applicant's proposed front yard setback is not compliant with guideline 7.4.2 sub 7A, and the applicant's proposed front yard is dominated by incompatible hardscape driveway. Any applicant for a heritage permit under the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan enacted by bylaw 2016-89 bears the evidentiary onus of establishing that the building mass and height of the proposed construction are consistent with the applicable Grade 1 building. The applicant has not fulfilled this burden. Furthermore, a simple review of the proposed revised plans clearly demonstrate that the height and mass of the proposed new construction are not consistent with our Grade 1 house. The mass and height of the proposed building are drastically larger than the mass and height of our Grade 1 house. In these circumstances, respectfully, this committee does not have the jurisdiction or discretion to grant the requested heritage permit. This jurisdiction is removed by virtue of section 7.4.2 sub 3 and 7.4.2 sub 7A of the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan enacted by bylaw 2016-89. These provisions of this plan are not inconsistent with and in fact fulfill the legislative intent of the Ontario Heritage Act. Respectfully, should this committee grant the requested heritage permit, it will be acting ultra vires its legislative authority, which by necessity renders the decision unreasonable and without jurisdiction. Such a decision would be vulnerable on judicial review, as the committee would have acted without jurisdiction. As the owner of the Grade 1 property expressly referred to in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan enacted pursuant to Bylaw 2016-89, we are a party withstanding to this proceeding and rely on the following. My submissions made herein today, my submissions made on January 7th, 2022 at the meeting hosted by Councillor King, my letter of February 7th, 2022 with enclosures to the chairman and committee coordinator of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, my letter of December 29th, 2021 to same with enclosures, my letter of November 24th, 2021 to same with enclosures, my letter of November 16th, 2021 to same with enclosures, and my submissions made to this committee on November 30th, 2021. Respectfully, this honorable committee does not have the jurisdiction pursuant to Bylaw 2016-89 to grant the permit sought as the proposed construction violates the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the subcommittee? Seeing none, we can move on to Kent.
Thank you. I actually have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. The next registered speaker is Susan Peterson.
Hello, I'm Susan Peterson. I live about a block away from this proposed development. I spoke to you at the earlier meeting. I would like to reiterate that the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Plan states that Rockcliffe Park is a rare and significant approach to estate layout and landscape. As you know, I think it dates from 1864 and it still survives. It has evolved, to be sure, but it has by and large managed to be faithful to its original inspiration. The Heritage Plan, our Heritage Plan calls it, quote, a unique cultural heritage landscape. And it says that that cultural heritage landscape, quote, shall be conserved and enhanced. This is the idea of houses in a park where the park-like setting dominates the houses. And in that, it's unique in Canada. Now, I realize the plans for this house have been revised, and we've heard from two speakers on that. But do the changes go far enough to meet the requirements of our heritage plan? The new staff report says definitely they do not in a number of ways. And I certainly endorse that with a resounding no. The revised plans do not meet our heritage, the requirements of our heritage plan. The proposal does not conserve and enhance Rockcliffe Park's unique character as required by our heritage plan. It does not maintain the park-like attributes and qualities of Rockcliffe Park, which is characterized by houses in a visually continuous, rich landscape setting. The staff report agrees with all this. It is not compatible with or sympathetic to or has regard for the height, massing, and setbacks of the established heritage character of the streetscape. The staff report says that. The height and mass of the new building is not consistent with the height and mass of the Grade 1 building next to it, as the last speaker has just said. Even with minor revisions that have been made, it is not in height and not in mass. And I want to speak to the height issue because that has not been, I think, adequately addressed. Mr. Reeves says, quote, we are not asking for 1 inch of additional height. So the fact of the matter is that the staff report now confirms that the height of the Grade 1 house next to the proposed building was measured incorrectly by the applicant and is still measured incorrectly by the applicant. The applicant says that they measured to the top of the roof line of that Grade 1 house, and they compare the new house to it, the proposed house, and say it's equal to that. And that was certainly shown in the illustrations that Mr. Reeves just showed us a few minutes ago. But the fact of the matter is the height of the sloped roof houses is not measured to the top of the roof, but to the midpoint of the sloped roof, which the staff report now acknowledges. So that is the way you measure it. And if the height of the proposed house exceeds and is not consistent with the Grade 1 house next to it, it conflicts with our heritage plan. And the height of the house conflicts with our heritage plan. So there is no argument that can be made that meeting the height of the sloped roof means that it's okay with our heritage plan. It's not okay with our heritage plan. And the applicant has mismeasured, if you wish, the height of what he's supposed to be consistent with. Now that's with height. So mass and massing, I admit that, cripes, I looked at all this stuff and it's very confusing exactly what you're looking at, but it's a huge house. It's 8,400 square feet. The footprint is way more than twice the size of the footprint of its neighbor next to it. So it gives you a sense of the comparative mass. The footprint has only been decreased by the revisions by 4 square meters, but it is 464 square meters. So that's not very much of a decrease. So the mass is still huge compared to the grade 1 house next to it and huge compared to most of the houses around it. So I do not think this should be approved. This would be a major step in the erosion of the heritage character of our community. It would be a very sad step, and I ask you to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you, and I'll ask for the next registered speaker, Marianne Favor.
Good morning. My intention was to reiterate sections of our plan that were not respected by the applicant, despite many changes and many new designs. But I'm very grateful to the councillor and to the city staff who've done just that. And you've also heard from both my colleague, Michael Kellen, and the neighbors, as well as Susan Aquino. So I just want to support the opposition so ably stated by these people, and to thank the city staff for their excellent work. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And are there any questions for this delegation? Seeing none, thank you. And I just wanted to check with David Fleming as to whether he would like to comment on this item, noting the change in this motion.
Hello.
Hello.
Are you asking me to speak? I was just
well,
joining.
yes, I was just asking if
I
you
missed your
wanted to comment.
remarks. I'm sorry. Heritage Ottawa has been pleased to have had an opportunity to review the application for an addition to the Rockcliffe Plan, Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District, which has continued to evolve and change over the past few months. At 5 iterations, it comes one short of the Chateau Laurier, which had 6. We feel that the changes reflected in the application before you today and efforts to mitigate any perceived shortcomings come closer to meeting the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation Plan guidelines as applicable to this property. Although the design, an Asian expression with modernist lines, make it less sympathetic to the existing homes within the HCD with their more conventional designs, we do not feel that this alone is a reason to reject this application. Any perceived incompatibilities are offset by other considerations such as streetscape, setbacks, and the retention of mature trees. Indeed, the proposed structure fits very well within the existing landscape. In response to concerns raised at the November subcommittee meeting, the proponent has reconfigured the height and massing to make it more consistent with the guidelines for the plan and more sympathetic to the neighboring grade 1 building. We agreed with the previous staff report recommendation that you posted on the agenda until the recent changes, that any recommendation be conditional on further reconfiguration of the building to ensure that it is more sympathetic and compatible to its neighbor to the north. In support of our recommendations, may we suggest that in future proposals of this type, that proponents be required to also provide winter renderings of the property, not just those with and without trees. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments for David? Seeing none, does the committee have any questions for staff? And I see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some questions for staff. And I think I'd like to start with pulling up, if it's possible, Eric, to pull up some of the images of the design that I'd like to see. Again, the image that shows the property next to 484 from the Cloverdale perspective. And I'd also like to see a design that shows the landscaping plan of the property.
Perhaps if staff could direct me to the appropriate slide share to save time.
I believe Vice Chair Quinn's talking about the second slide on the staff presentation.
Would that be it?
Well, no, but this is a good slide nonetheless. It actually shows very well the complication that the oddity of this lot within this enclave, and that the lot that they're surrounded by vacant lots, which are obviously likely to be developed in time. But I guess I do have a question about this, Adrian. There's a large house at the corner of Cloverdale and Hillsdale, which is just to the north of 484. And I'm just wondering, from the rear, when you look at that property from the rear, how many stories is it? Hello?
Hi, through you, Chair. I believe that is 2 stories. Is that 540 Hillsdale?
Yes.
Yes, I believe that is 2 stories at home.
Thank you. But what I'd like to look at is the slide that shows the rendering of 480 Cloverdale from perspective from Cloverdale itself. Thank you for taking the time to do this. There's that's pretty good. But that shows 484. And then I'd like you to speak to this question of the roof line issue.
Thanks for your question. So the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan provides that the height of new construction must be consistent with the height of adjacent grade 1 buildings. And as a speaker previously mentioned, typically according to the zoning bylaw, the height of a flat roofed structure is measured to its peak, whereas a sloped building is measured to the midpoint of the roof, which would be the case for 484 Cloverdale. So the elevations or the elevation calculations that the applicant provided show that the roof peak of 480 Cloverdale is lower than the roof peak of 484 Cloverdale, but it is higher than its midpoint. The fact that the building has been set 1 meter closer to the street and that it does not align with 484 Cloverdale, it exacerbates the perceived height of the building. So not only is it higher than the midpoint of the building next door, but because it's closer to the street, it also appears larger for that reason.
And higher by how many meters?
That would be 1.66 meters higher than the midpoint.
Thank you. And then the other slide, I would, if I could, probably back to line box, showing the landscaping. It had the new trees around the perimeter of the property, the proposed new trees. It's an aerial. Excuse me. There. Yes, there we are. Is there any way you could speak to, especially the north side property, how many of these proposed trees are evergreens? And are there plans to plant evergreen trees that are have a certain mature, closer to a mature size than just small shrub-like size to start with, if you know what I mean? I'm just trying to consider Mr. Brunt's concerns about that end of the property.
Through you, Chair. Eric, I think this is the previous iteration. I think maybe yes, there's the new one. So the applicant does show, I believe here on this plan, the mixture of evergreen and coniferous trees. Staff are not aware of the exact number. I think the applicant would need to confirm that.
Having
I
walked around there myself a few times now, there is quite a bit of growth along that side of the property. Is that, and I understand only 8 trees are going to be coming down?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members? Seeing none, do any of the members have any general comments on this item? And I see that Vice Chair Quinn raised her hand first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, excuse me. I just want to say that I really appreciate the effort that has gone into this project from on all sides. Agreeing how many iterations, I think somebody said it was the 5th iteration, and every effort seems to be made to address concerns. I think that what we have here is a very challenging site because it is the only lot within this enclave that actually extends twice the length of everybody else's. The house that existed on that lot in the past also extended past the rear of 484 Cloverdale with a swimming pool, etc. And I guess from my perspective and my sense of interpreting green space and park-like setting, which is so essential to the heritage character of Rockcliffe Park, is really about the experience from the public realm perspective of that neighborhood. And what we are talking about here is a very internal landlocked property that is not seen from the public realm from any perspective other than Cloverdale. And from that perspective, it would seem to me that the owner and the architect have gone to great lengths to present a very indeed large house as that it has a size that is compatible with the streetscape, as the bulk of the house is to the rear of that property, and it does indeed have a very steep slope, and so that is really not visible from the street. It is visible from the tennis courts clearly, and visible from immediate neighbors, just as any new house inevitably is going to be. So the concerns, I'm struggling with the concern that this is going to somehow impede on that critical heritage characteristic of Rockcliffe Park. So I am a little disappointed to see that it has moved forward by a meter closer to Cloverdale. But without belaboring the point, I will say that I will not be supporting the staff recommendation today. I do not have a problem with this. I think a lot of effort has been made. The materials are stone, cedar, copper, and that are very natural tones. And effort has been made to change the coloration, etc. So I think that is my, I just want to let you know that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Quinn. Member Podolsky.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I visited the property, and I was fortunate to be a spectator or an attendant of the meeting that was held, that was chaired by you, Chair King, with the residents and Linebox. So I had an insight into the dialogue that went on to try to come up with a revised design that satisfied the Rockcliffe Heritage Committee and the immediate neighbors. Like Carol, I struggle with this one as well, because I think that from the perspective of the public realm, what one experiences on Cloverdale and the streets of Rockcliffe, there's a very modest intervention into the public realm perception, screened by trees, and it would be quite a routine approval, I think, that if this was the only issue. What appears to be at stake here are two things. One is the interpretation of the park-like setting of the Rockcliffe Heritage Conservation Plan, which really sets guidelines and a vision for the private lands that neighbors share on their side and rear property lines in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. This is, as has been said, a unique principle that is appropriate for this heritage district, but not necessarily others. And the implication of that suggests that each new intervention, each new building or addition to building should give recognition to the shared common spaces that they all enjoy. What I see here is that there is not been that much effort other than some proposed screening to the adjacent properties to the north and to the south. And I think that what I also have to bear in mind, as I guess we all do, is the future of development on 454 Cloverdale, which is an equal-sized lot to the south that could certainly serve another home of the same footprint and size. Having said all that, I think that there would be a benefit for the owner and the architect to try one more time to see whether or not they can modify the form of the building to be a little more generous to the neighbors and to give a gesture of adoption of the Heritage District Plan. And in that respect, I think there'd be a benefit, and I would support the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Member Podolsky. Member Brockington.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to know if I can ask staff to go back and ask one question, and that is, in reading the staff report, staff detail that they basically worked in concert with the applicant or the applicant's reps and the architect to refine a number of characteristics of the plan, but despite, pick the right word, warnings or an inability to communicate that staff would be recommending this. The proposal is still before us. Was staff very clear to the applicant in advance that there would not be a recommendation based on the drawings or the concept that they had seen? Because we seem to be, again, investing a lot of time in an application that is likely not going to be recommended today. And I want to know how close. I agree with Barry's comment. I want to see something built here, but it has to respect, heritage and neighborhood. So I just want to get staff's comment. Is a solution here possible if the committee rejects this today and they go back to the drawing board?
And I'll permit a question to staff.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Staff advised the applicant earlier this week that we had continued concerns with the proposal and asked them to once again extend the 90-day statutory timeline to continue the dialogue and see if we could come to a solution that everybody was happy with. They declined to extend that statutory timeline. So we are before the committee today with a recommendation because we have to make, council has to make a decision on this application by February the 28th. And if they do not, it would be deemed to be approved under the Ontario Heritage Act. So part of the reason for the switch in the staff recommendation was that we did not think that based on our discussions with the applicant that we were going to get to a place whereby the fundamental changes that we believe are needed to this proposal in order to make it appropriate, we did not believe those were going to happen. And so in order to fulfill the requirements of the Heritage Act, we are recommending that committee recommend that council refuse this application.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. The next, I guess, member with their hand raised is Member Conforti.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have similar concerns as the other members have described. I again, like Carolyn said, I do really appreciate the effort, and it does sound like, you know, that dialogue is happening, which I think is really important. At the same time, you know, as Councillor Brockington mentioned, I think the directive to the owner and the architect need to be very clear from staff. I think it's definitely closer. I think, you know, I would say the concerns from the neighbors and from the community and the Community Heritage Committee need to really be sort of fine-tuned and really, you know, bring a laser focus to that, because I agree that, you know, from the street, from the public realm, it will be screened to some degree. So if the issue is the style of the building, we really need to separate that and really look at the guidelines and really look at what the issue is, because like Carolyn said, 5 iterations of a design, I just want to recognize, you know, that the proponent is really trying and is really trying to meet halfway, but I also would support refusing this application to allow, like Leslie said, that extra time. But I do think we're close, and I think, you know, both sides sort of are probably getting closer, but we do, I think, have to be respectful of the work that's gone in. So.
Thank you for your comments. I see that Member Gower has his hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I'm listening to all of the comments, and it's a good discussion and a good debate. If I remember from last fall, this committee said we're not satisfied with the design that was in front of us last fall, and it's come back, and to my eye, the updated rendering shows something that's even more blockier and less compatible than what was here before. So we're not headed in the right direction. I'm supportive of staff's recommendation to refuse this. I mean, it's kind of a ridiculously large, blocky home. I don't like to be a judge on architecture, but this is further away from what I think the neighborhood would be accepting than it was before. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised. So I would also say that while new construction is welcome. And obviously, we've been very gratified that the applicant has been going back and forth with residents, with my office, with the Residents Association. It is still the expectation under the Heritage Conservation District Plan that we seek conformity to its specifications, which were specifically created to actively protect the heritage of Rockcliffe Park, which is the only park neighborhood in Canada, as we heard residents talk about today. The plan explicitly notes that new buildings shall contribute to and not detract from the heritage character of the Heritage Conservation District and its attributes. And the plan also dictates that construction of new buildings will only be permitted when the new building does not detract from the historic landscape characteristics of associated streetscape. The height and mass of the new building are consistent with grade 1 buildings and associated streetscapes, and the siting and materials of the new building are compatible with those streetscapes. Considering the circumstances surrounding 480 Cloverdale, the new submission, in my estimation, is not compatible with the built forms in the surrounding context and does not respect the character of the neighborhood, despite efforts by the applicant to make design changes in response to neighbor concerns. In the new submission, the overall height has not been reduced. The height is not comparable to area properties in the manner by which it's supposed to be measured, and particularly does not conform to the height of the grade 1 property next door to the north at 484 Cloverdale. And finally, the building footprint is even larger than first proposed. Consequently, in my comments on this file, I noted that I believe the new submitted design in its current form does not conform with the Heritage Conservation District Plan. And I believe that the design as proposed will create an unacceptable adverse impact on abutting and adjoining properties and will negatively impact the neighborhood character in general. So as a result, as ward councillor, I concur with the city staff's recommendation to refuse the application. I do know that during comments, Vice Chair Quinn did express intent to dissent. I'm just wondering if there's any other members who are going to dissent, whether we should go to yays or nays, or whether we should carry with some dissents. And I see that Member Moffat has raised his hand.
Simply confirming I'll be supporting Member Quinn's comments and dissenting.
Okay. So is the replacement report carried with the dissent of Vice Chair Quinn and Member Moffat?
Carried.
Yes, carried.
Carried. Thank you so much. And we will just move to item number 5. Sorry, I'm just trying to navigate to item number 5, which is an application to alter 619 Manor Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Thank you, Chair. This item concerns the application to alter 619 Manor Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. The property is located on the west side of Manor Avenue between Coltrane and Thorold Roads. Next slide, please. The property is classified as a grade 1 property in the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan. The main house on this property was constructed circa 1922 in the English cottage and arts and crafts styles. It is 1.5 stories in height and has an asymmetrical L-shaped plan. The building features a gabled frontispiece, multi-paned windows, a variety of exterior materials, half timbering, and a steeply pitched roof. The landscape features of the property are typical of Manor Avenue and include a substantial front yard dotted with mature trees, cedar hedges and shrubs, and a stepped walkway. Next slide, please. The application to alter 619 Manor Avenue is to permit the construction of 2 single-story side additions to the existing building. The application also includes permission to remove an existing sunroom and convert it to interior living spaces, the addition of a flat canopy over the front entrance door, and landscaping changes. The application is accompanied by a landscape plan that proposes changes in the front and rear yards, additional plant materials, sloping plant beds, a new driveway, stone retaining walls, a flagstone path, patios, pool shed, and new pool are proposed to be added. 2 large Norway maple trees are proposed to be removed and replaced with a new cedar hedge. Next slide, please. The south addition, which is shown on the left of this slide, will include a separate principal bedroom accessed through the ground floor living room via a transparent glass link. It will contain a full basement. The north addition, shown on the right of this slide, is proposed to replace a former non-conforming detached garage, which was demolished in 2021 due to disrepair. The new garage will maintain the previous side yard setback, but will be set closer to the street and linked with the house by a glass vestibule. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides show renderings of the proposal as seen from Manor Avenue. On this slide, the south addition is shown to the left. Next slide, please. And shown from a different angle, the north addition, which is the reconstructed side garage, can be seen here with its attachment to the existing home. Next slide, please. Heritage staff have evaluated the proposal against the guidelines in the Rockcliffe Park HCD plan. The proposal meets the provisions of the plan with respect to new additions and landscaping. Next slide, please. The proposal has also been evaluated against the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. The proposal is consistent with standards 1 and 11. Next slide, please. The application was subject to pre-consultation with the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association Heritage Committee. The proposed plans were posted on DevApps and circulated to the RPRA, Heritage Ottawa, and neighbours within 30 metres. Councillor King is also aware of the application. Next slide, please. Heritage staff recommend approval of the application to alter 619 Manor Avenue. Staff requests standard conditions to the proposal with respect to the provision of final exterior building materials and a final grading plan. Next slide, please. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you for your presentation. We did receive correspondence from the Rockcliffe Park Residents Association in opposition to this application, I believe this morning, and we do have registered speakers. The first registered speaker is Mary Ann Favor from Rockcliffe Park Residents Association.
Good morning again. Yeah, we have 2 questions about this application. One is the actual legality of the garage, which will be there was a garage there, and as Adrian acknowledged, it was demolished a few years ago, but that was a detached garage. They now wish to build an attached garage that will then be 5 feet from the neighboring property. And the setback requirement for an attached garage is 15 feet. So I wonder how that can possibly receive approval. That is my first question. And the second one, well, we is basically that we object to, well, once again, the RPRA and Heritage Plan whose objective is to maintain the park-like attributes, as we've also mentioned on the 480, and to encourage the retention of existing trees, shrubs, hedges, and landscape features on public property. I think we're just basically alarmed that the proposed pool and will basically, with pool, the concrete deck, the pool shed, the sauna, will occupy more, I mean, basically most of the entire greenscape of the backyard. And those are our two concerns. But I guess the one would be a bylaw concern and the other is a retention of green space. That's basically it.
I appreciate those questions, and I'm willing to relay that to staff when members have time to ask questions. So thank you so much. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your deputation. And the next registered speaker is David Fleming from Heritage Ottawa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Heritage Ottawa supports the staff recommendation for this property. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last registered speaker is William Ritzie. And I don't know if William is with us this morning.
Chair, if Mr. Ritzie could accept the prompt to be promoted to panelist. Oh, he should be coming online now.
Excellent, thank you. And thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Ritzie. You can proceed with your comments. And you just need to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, you can proceed.
Sorry about that. Yes, I guess just to address the couple of concerns. One had to do with the legalities of going from a detached garage to an attached garage. We have filed for a application to the Committee of Adjustment to deviate from the required 4.5 meters as a side yard for an attached garage to the 1.56 meters. That has been submitted, and we're the hearing is on March the 16th for that particular bylaw amendment. It's of interest that the bylaw, the garage, although it occupies roughly the same footprint, is a bit larger, but majority of the increased garage is set at the rear yard. And it's interesting that we probably all know that once the garage is in the rear yard, you only require the 1.5 meters. So it kind of straddles the bylaw requirement between 4.5 and 1.5. Anyway, that change in the bylaw has been addressed through that application. The other part is the concern of the private realm, backyard being occupied by amenity spaces by the owner. Adrian had mentioned that there are a couple of trees that are to be removed. They're at the rear property line. And we have addressed that with the neighbor abutting their rear yard, and will be replaced with new planting. The big issue on landscaping is what you see from Manor, and right now, except for the large oak tree, there's very little planting on that south side where the other addition will be occurring. But we've also augmented that front yard landscape piece with not only that addition being set back significantly from the main house and from the street, but with significant new proposed planting.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any questions from members of the subcommittee? Seeing none, thank you for your participation this morning. Now, does the committee have any questions for staff? And I see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have a question about the presentation. The images that were shared of the design does not in any way indicate what's going on in the backyard. Is there something that can be shared with us to show? It sounds like there's a pool planned with hardscaping, sheds, saunas.
Through you, Chair. I believe only the landscape plan shows those changes, and unfortunately we didn't receive renderings of the landscape plan in the rear yard.
Okay, because we've just gone through a process with 480 Cloverdale where what's going on beyond what is visible from the street was deemed to be critically important, and in fact resulted in, well, we just saw what happened. And yet our very next item in Rockcliffe does not include what's going to be happening back there. And I do know, having read a submission that this is a big concern for Rockcliffe Park Residents Association, as well as neighbor, just the extent of hardscape and additional structures. I'm just wondering how that is reconciled with the arguments that we heard just a few minutes ago about the other property.
Thank you. And I see that Leslie has her hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the concerns raised by the Vice Chair. The landscape plan is attached to the staff report as document 8. And it does, I unfortunately, I don't think I can share my screen, and I'm not sure.
Okay, I've got it up right now. I'm just whipping through. Oh,
okay, there we go.
Okay, thank you very much.
The committee coordinator has done it. So I think you can see here, the front yard landscaping, the rear yard landscaping that looks like a long, narrow pool at the back. I think one of the things I would comment, and then I might turn it back to Adrian in terms of the details, is that if you read the Heritage Survey form for this property and its comments on landscape and the contribution to the environment, it speaks a lot about the front yard and a lot about the side yard. And so it speaks to sort of the sloping front yard, how that contributes to the street, that sort of thing. This is not one of those properties where we have a really large rear yard currently. I think there's been a lot of discussion about the appropriate location for an addition here and a garage and where to put the landscaping and that sort of thing. So Adrian can speak more to the details, but my knowledge of the file is that a lot of work has gone into kind of minimizing the amount of hard landscaping as much as we can, and minimizing tree loss and incorporation of new trees into the development. So that I hope is we don't generally require renderings as part of for a landscape plan when there's no addition at the rear. So we usually just go on the landscape plan that's been submitted as part of the application.
Through you, Chair, just to add to Leslie's response, we did identify during pre-consultation with the RPRA that because there is such an expansive front yard and it is identified as an attribute in the survey form, that a lot of focus should be placed on retaining as much front yard in an informal manner as possible, noting that there might be some changes to the rear yard. It is staff's opinion that it does meet the provisions of the plan with respect to soft landscaping. And the applicant is also proposing to add additional plantings and planters as well that will help to soften that.
Thank you.
And thank you for those additional comments. Member Hassel.
A quick point of clarification for staff. I just pulled up the address on Geo Ottawa, and they seem to already have a pool in their rear yard. Is this replacement of the existing pool with a different pool?
Through your chair, yes, the pool that was existing in the rear yard was removed last year, along with the detached garage. It's since been filled in, and according to the new landscape plan, there will be a new pool that replaces it. And based on the plan, it appears that it will be smaller, or at least longer and narrower than what was there before.
Okay, so just to clarify, the staff assessment is that the pool and these other changes that have been brought up are not necessarily a huge increase in the built footprint of the backyard.
Yes, that's correct, Member Halsall.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying, Adrian.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? I was going to follow up, seeing no other questions from members. I was going to follow up on that, but I think that you've answered my questions concerning the softscaping and the provisions, basically meeting the provisions of the plan in the back. And I appreciated Member Hassell's question about the previous use of the site, and in conjunction with how the site will go forward. There was a question from Rockcliffe Park Residents Association, and I think the other resident, about the actual legality of the garage from detached versus attached. And I was wondering if staff could at least speak to that point in terms of the staff report and its recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. So Heritage staff have consulted with the applicant since the beginning of last year on this proposal. And there have been a number of options presented that would conform with both the provisions of the HCD plan as well as the zoning bylaw. The option that was presented here to reinstate the garage that was demolished and build an addition on the other side was found to be the most appropriate solution according to the HCD plan, because there is a smaller side yard setback, and the garage will be increased in size. The applicant will need to seek a minor variance following decision of council. So the legality with respect to that and zoning conformity will be decided then, but staff have no concerns or no objections to that forthcoming application.
And of course, that's the purview of the Planning Act, and I'm assuming Committee of Adjustment versus the heritage considerations that we are looking at here. So those would be dealt with there. Thank you. I think that does answer my own questions as well as the questions of residents. So are there any more questions to staff? Seeing none, do any of the members have any comments on this item? And I think that Member Hassell raised her hand.
Yes, I'll keep it brief on this one. I think it is less of an intervention than the previous application that we've been looking at, but I think Carolyn has raised a very valid point here about the consistency of how we apply the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District Plan. We are looking at another application that sees additions. We are looking at more of a street impact on this one than on the previous one in terms of the available screening. I am in support of the staff recommendation on this file, but I would just like to draw attention to Carolyn's comments and voice my support for them.
Thank you for that. And that is a conversation that we're going to continue to have with heritage staff and also residents about consistency of application and interpretation of the application of the Heritage Conservation District Plan in Rockcliffe Park. I think we're hearing that very clearly. And obviously we want to work towards some consensus in terms of its interpretation, both around this table and in the community. So I also appreciate you pointing that out. So Is the report in front of us carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you so much. And so we are now at the end, near the end of our meeting. So there are no in-camera items. There are no notices of motions before us for consideration at a subsequent meeting. Are there any inquiries? There are no inquiries. Under other business, there are 2 planning circulation on the agenda, which were distributed to members prior to the meeting. Members of the public have the opportunity to comment through DevApps on ottawa.ca. Ottawa Heritage Act applications would be considered at a later date. Is there any other business? Seeing none. On adjournment, is the motion carried?
Carried.
We're adjourned.
Carried.
Thank you, everyone. And the next regular meeting will be held on March 8th, 2022.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.